Okay, we're good to go.
Okay. All right, welcome back. So the next presentation is from Stella Jones, Inc. Is it Kyle Brown with us tonight or somebody else?
I think we have Bruce McCall.
Okay.
Let's see here. Just pull him up.
Excellent. Hi. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I will just quickly share my screen. There we go. Can everyone see that, my presentation?
Yeah.
Excellent. So thank you again. My name is Bruce McCall Richmond. I'm a planner with Glenn Schnarr & Associates. I'm here with my colleague Anindita Datta on behalf of Stella Jones, Inc., owners of the properties located at 201 Wellington Street and 600 Victoria Street. The Stella Jones properties are generally located adjacent to the south of the former rail corridor. And then an existing wood treatment plant is currently operating at 201 Wellington Street. To date, and as Steve mentioned at the start of the meeting, town staff have been assisting our team with various applications, including a site alteration and site plan approval application to address stormwater and drainage matters on site. And most recently, a consent application was approved to sever a portion of the Besley Farm, and 600 Victoria Street was purchased. That would be in and around here. 600 Victoria Street is hatched, and the severed piece is here. We've also been to council recently for a minor variance application to permit a temporary structure. So Stella Jones is quite active on site right now, and the town has been very helpful in achieving and assisting us with their objectives. Ultimately, these properties will be merged with the overall property, and the overall property itself will continue to be within the Stage 2 servicing area. In the upcoming weeks, we anticipate filing a site plan application for a new building shown down here, generally located at the southeast corner of the overall property, which is partially on 600 Victoria Street and partially on the severed lands, let's call them. And it's planned to be approximately 60,000 square feet. And as mentioned, with respect to the town's servicing phasing program, the properties are located in the Stage 2 area. I'll now turn it over to Anindita, who can explain the specific servicing request and some of the intricacies associated with the sanitary line extension contemplated as part of the new site plan application.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you, Bruce. I'm Anindita. I'm with Crozier Consulting Engineers. We're doing the engineering and servicing design for this development. Just as a bit of background, so the Highland Village subdivision has a sewage pump station located on that property, and that pump station has been designed to be able to, in the future, service the lands that are hatched in orange on the plan that's on your screen. This is about 35 hectares of land, and it's primarily lands within the Shelburne West secondary area plan. This design was completed in conjunction with Mr. Weaver and Mr. Burnett. Part of the plan to expand the capacity of the pump station was to also find a viable outlet to the existing municipal sewer network. Per the master servicing plan prepared in 2006 for this area, that outlet was identified to be on Franklin Street, which you can see on the screen over there. So to facilitate the conveyance of sewage from these lands to the municipal sanitary sewer network, there would have to be a force main and gravity sewer combination running through the Highland Village property and then through the Stella Jones lands to get to Franklin Street. As part of the site plan package for this proposed development, we're showing and completing the design of this corridor. And it is the intention that Stella-Jones will construct those works and provide for conveyance capacity for the lands in Orange as well. The intention there is also that the Stella-Jones lands will then tie into this network. Thank you.
Okay. Steve, do you have any comments on this one?
Just briefly, so this is a really helpful point to emphasize in terms of the overall servicing strategy and plan for that west area within the remaining land within the current urban boundary. This was the subject of a development charge area-specific bylaw and study last fall, which was ultimately approved by council and is in place now to ensure that the land serviced by that pump station, the section of force main that you see in the solid red line on this slide, which is in place and was constructed by Tribute, and then the dashed red line that Anindita was referring to as the remaining section of force main and gravity sewer that is needed to complete that servicing connection. That servicing connection is essential to all of the land that you see highlighted on this map. So the previous presentations that you just heard for the land on the north side of Main Street, as well as the land to the west, being the 501, 505 Main Street West property. Those developments rely on, that remaining section of force main as well. The only thing that I can think of that has changed though since that original servicing strategy for this area was that the land on the east side of the former rail corridor, so the Stone Ridge or Marimel Homes property, that is a separate servicing plan has now been developed for that, where those lands will not need to connect into the Highland Village pump station. So those will be serviced through the First and Second Ave, directing sanitary flows that way into the existing network. But everything else, as you see here, is contingent upon that remaining section of force main and gravity sewer being connected through the Stella-Jones lands into the Franklin Street sewer.
So everything west of the rail corridor.
Yes.
Okay. Can I just have you take that screen share down? Perfect. Thank you. Any questions from council? No. Okay. Can I get a motion then to receive the presentation from Stella-Jones for information? Councillor Wagner, second by Councillor Hall. All in favor? It's carried. Okay. And the last presentation is from Oldfields on behalf of Flato Developments.
Oh, I'm just able to start my video now. Sorry about that. It wasn't working. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I know we've probably all had long days, so I'm not going to take too much of your time. I'm Emma West, a partner at Bousfields, and Bousfields is the planning consultant for Flato Developments with respect to their lands on the west side of Shelburne. And I'm here tonight with Flato and other members of the team, which include IBI Group for servicing and Denton's their legal counsel. I just want to start by saying that Flato is not requesting a reallocation from any servicing allocation that has already been allocated. So it's been great to hear about all of the other activity and development coming in the community, but Flato is not requesting that any of that be reallocated, anything that's been allocated be reallocated. I'll also add that having participated in the public session regarding the municipal Class EA process, predominantly last year, and the related council meetings dealing with the environmental assessment process, we are aware and understand that there are significant constraints with respect to servicing capacity in the town. You know, from the meeting on March 22nd, we understand that even for many of the developments, there isn't enough capacity, and that number is somewhere around 500 units that there is not capacity for. So there's no question that the wastewater treatment plant requires upgrades. And we're aware that these constraints affect future development in the town and are not limited to lands outside the existing settlement area boundary. We have monitored the council meetings, including the meeting on Monday night. And we heard about this earlier from Mr. Weaver and Mr. Burnett's presentations, that council supported staff's recommendation to allocate $2 million to initiate the design work to upgrade the wastewater treatment plant. And we understand that after the design work is complete, it will take 2 to 3 years at least to construct the upgrades associated with that design work that will be underway soon. So Flato shares council and staff's commitment to ensure that adequate services and reserve servicing capacity exists in the town's water and wastewater infrastructure to meet the town's current and future growth needs. So as you know, Flato submitted applications for official plan and zoning bylaw amendments and draft plan of subdivision to the town on March 19th of this year, and an official plan amendment application to the county on March 23rd. These applications are to permit 93 purpose-built rental seniors apartment units and a commercial plaza, which you've heard is approximately 1,800 square meters of gross floor area. This proposal will contribute to a complete community within the town of Shelburne, and particularly on the west side of town. Flato supports complete community design and have developed this in many of their other projects in other municipalities. Flato's proposal encompasses only the first planned phase of development for their lands in Shelburne. And the servicing allocation request that Flato submitted on April 19th only applies to the phase 1 lands. So for the 93 seniors apartment units and the commercial plaza. With respect to the servicing requirements for Flato's phase 1 developments, we note that we assumed a people per unit rate of 1.57, which is reasonable considering it's apartments for seniors. And we didn't apply the blended rate of 3.38 that the town had used in some of the analysis related to the servicing allocation. So that means Flato's seniors apartments would be at least equivalent to or less than the remaining capacity of 75 units that was used with the blended people per unit rate in the town's analysis. So as I said, Flato's request is for servicing allocation for their phase 1 development only for the 93 seniors apartments units and the commercial plaza. And that would be from the reserve capacity and not from capacity that is already allocated. However, we know that the applications have only been recently submitted and will be reviewed by the town and the county. And Flato acknowledges that if the capacity cannot be reserved now, with the town moving towards increasing the capacity by initiating the design work on the upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant, Flato requests that the application be processed or continue to be processed, and that the allocation be provided at the time of the approval. And if necessary, Flato would support the use of a holding provision when the lands are rezoned. And finally, I just want to briefly comment on servicing allocation policies, because I know that this has been a matter discussed at council as well. We know that there are many different approaches that can be used, including the use it or lose it approach. Flato supports such a policy that would allow developments that are already ready for construction to proceed. But with that said, council council's support to initiate the design work for the upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant, and therefore, by extension, a commitment to accommodate growth for different developments throughout the town. A use it or lose it policy might only be helpful in the short term and not necessarily in the long term when those upgrades have been made. So thank you again for the opportunity to continue to discuss this matter with you. And I note that my comments that I provided were provided to the town earlier today in a letter. So if you don't already have those, then you will have them. Thank you, and we're available to answer questions.
Thanks, Emma. Yes, and your letter from earlier today was shared with members of council, and I believe will likely show up on our next agenda in the communication section. So, Steve, just a question for you. Given what Emma's just indicated, that that Flato certainly understands the constraints that we're facing, which we've seen tonight. So in terms of processing their application and providing allocation when we're able to, what would that look like process-wise?
We're working on that. So as Emma mentioned, we did receive applications for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision in March. And we're currently, we've had a preliminary review of all of that information. We're satisfied that we've received the information that's required as per the pre-application meeting. We're working with the county to determine if they're satisfied as well. One of the key questions that they've been asking and that we've funneled to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, as they've inquired about this as well, is there any inference or any concern from the ministry perspective as it relates to the growth plan about moving an application forward through the process under that growth plan policy for private applications for urban expansion if there is not today a reserve capacity for that development, even though there is planned capacity? Because they do in the growth plan make that distinction about having reserve capacity for those types of applications as one of the criteria. Whereas if you're doing an expansion through the MCR, the requirement is planned capacity. So there is a distinction there. We haven't yet received any clarification from the ministry on that. We're working on that. I think the path forward, if we can't get clarification on that, would be to say the applications could be processed, but with a clear statement that this does not mean that today Shelburne has reserve capacity for it, that test will be evaluated further closer to when decisions need to be made on those applications. And that ultimately, in my view, is the test that needs to be met, that the application conforms to the growth plan when an approval is given. And that's where things like conditions of approval and holding provisions and that kind of thing can be considered to make sure that the development doesn't go too far until we have certainty that the capacity will be there for it.
And just to be clear, Emma, to confirm, I mean, your position is that your client's quite happy with having things move along, based on the understanding that when the allocation is available, then it'll be made at that time.
Yes, we're happy to continue to work with the town to review and respond to comments. And if that process is underway, and as Mr. Weaver indicated, conditions can be applied or a hold, even if we get to the point of the approval before there is before the construction of the upgrades is underway. But I think, in about a year from now, when the design work is complete, there will be an understanding of when those upgrades would occur and how they were going to occur. So I think if we keep moving with the application review process and that design work keeps chugging along, then I think there's some good things that will happen in parallel.
Yeah. Okay. So just to be clear, Steve, what sorts of things can happen in the interim then before we're at a point where we can actually, start to reserve allocation?
So provided the county's, on board with having an application process, there's a review that can be undertaken. The applications can be circulated. We've given preliminary comments already, but we can focus in more closely on the phase 1 submissions that have been made. The other process, of course, happening in parallel with all of this is the Highway Access Management Plan with MTO. We're still trying to finalize the details of that work plan with the MTO and the retention of a consultant for that. We do have a good work plan for it, and just finalizing some of those details with MTO. Further along in the process, there could be the standard Planning Act procedures undertaken as well with respect to public consultation and getting feedback from the community. The input from the applications can also be used towards the master servicing plan work that SPA is doing, and figuring out some more of the details about how to get the wastewater from that side of town to the plant and where there are some infrastructure improvements needed between those 2 points. So yeah, there's lots of things that can be worked on in parallel in the meantime between today and when the servicing capacity is sorted out.
So I mean, the way I look at it, in a perfect world, well, in an absolutely perfect world, we'd have the allocation now, but in a perfect world, given the realities we're facing, there hopefully are certain things that can move concurrently, while we work to expand the capacity of the plant, so that we're not kind of losing that time during the interim period. And it sounds from what you're saying that there certainly are lots of things that can be done process-wise to kind of get to a point where they'll be closer to be shovel ready when we are in a position to actually give that reserve.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, there's lots of things that need to be figured out, and we can concentrate on other aspects in the meantime, such as the transportation and highway access components, for sure.
Okay. Questions from council? Deputy Mayor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Mills. First of all, I just want to say that I appreciate throughout this entire session the tone of collaboration, and I am happy to hear from Emma that never is the intention of Flato to ask for allocation to be, in essence, yanked from anybody else. And so there's a fairness that is understood, and I appreciate that. And I also appreciate hearing from Steve that there's an opportunity to continue to work with Flato to process the application so that the project is not stymied. And I think that's really the important thing. So as long as we're able to do that, then I think we could work in tandem to eventually get to a point where I think everybody's happy.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think that speaks, quite directly to some of the concerns that were raised, by Fieldgate's council in the first presentation too. Any other questions from council? Okay, can I get a motion then to receive the presentation from Bows Fields Inc. for information? Moved by Councillor Buffett, second by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, so can I get a motion to move in camera pursuant to section 239 sub 2 sub F for council to receive advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose? Councillor Bernardo, second by Councillor Hall. All in favor? That's carried.